Welcome to Let's Make a Prototype. And I'm in the process of making a handful of prototypes of my upcoming game, Oros, which will be coming to Kickstarter sometime early 2021. I will keep you posted on that. Today, I'm putting together all of the mounted board components of the game. So those are things like the tiles, things like this. We have the little character standees, the ziggurat. We've got the map, which is there's two sides of the map that goes together, and this also folds in half, so we'll be dealing with hinges today. This is also double-sided. We also have a player mat, which is also double-sided and hinged. So we're putting all of those things together. First off, let's start with the chipboard. The chipboard is what makes the board. Now, chipboard is a paper product. This particular chipboard is double ply, so chipboard comes as single ply, which is just super bendable and flimsy. It would work just fine for pieces that are really small tokens and things like that. But if you're making a big mat or big board like this, single ply, it's just gonna be bendy and won't look that great. They also sell it as 4-ply, and that stuff is just crazy thick, super difficult to cut through. The double ply is about the thickness that is actually used in board games, and so it will feel very close to the final product. So chipboard, pick that up. Where I get the chipboard is at a local art store. They sell it in these large 30 by 40 inch sheets. So I just buy the big sheets and I cut it down myself. You can buy it at some art stores that will sell it already cut down in 11 by 17 sheets or 8.5 by 11 sheets. And that stuff, same stuff, still will work, but they mark up the price like crazy. So again, usually buying bulk, you're gonna get the best price. So finding those big sheets and an art store that sells it at a reasonable rate, it's worth doing the research just to figure out where that place is. The next thing is the artwork. And when you're putting the artwork together, and you'll notice I got here, that's one of the sheets of the artwork. I do everything on 11 by 17. I do 11 by 17 because that is a standard printout size. Either 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 17. So since it's 11 by 17, I also cut my chipboard to 11 by 17. That way, when I'm mounting these things together, it makes it super easy to get everything just lined up just right. And because it's 11 by 17, I try to maximize my materials as much as possible. So it's worth taking the time, getting your artwork, lay it out, figuring out the optimal way to lay all of your artwork out so you can fit as much as possible on a single sheet. So maximizing your printouts, maximizing your materials, it's gonna save you a lot of money in the long run. You notice here that I have player mats, I've got tiles, I have all of the sacred site tiles, even some things that I'm testing out with different little tokens and things for the different demigods, the different players, all on one sheet, and just so I can max out the sheet as much as possible. And we have the back sides. Now the back sides, it's important to try and minimize the artwork as much as possible if you're going to be printing on the backside. Now, sometimes you're printing on the backside because you absolutely need to have something on the backside. Sometimes you want to print on the backside just because it's going to look a little bit nicer. And if that's the case, try to figure out ways to minimize what's going on the backside, and so there's less of a margin for error. Because what's going to happen is we're going to mount our paper down onto the chipboard on one side, then we're going to mount the backside. And if the backside and the front side don't perfectly align, then one of those is going to have something that's a little bit off. So I always cut from my front side to guarantee that the front side looks perfect, but the back side, it's going to need a little bit of give. So think a 1/16 of an inch, an 1/8 of an inch type of give for the registration to be off, because it's not going to be perfect no matter how perfect you are at putting this stuff down. You'll also want to have on your artwork a bleed. So a bleed is where your artwork is. Bleed is extra artwork that goes beyond where your cut line is going to be. And the reason you do that is while you're cutting, especially on the backside where it might not be perfectly registered, as you cut through, if you're off just a little bit, it'll show. And so you put bleed there so that as you cut through, even if you're off, it won't really be something that's visible. Most people won't be able to really notice. And because you'll have bleed, which is the extra artwork, you'll also need crop marks. Now for me, I'm actually going to be laser cutting all of this out today rather than using my utility knife to cut it all by hand, but you can definitely just cut it all by hand. It's really not that difficult to do, especially if you have just straight edges. You notice though, I've got all these little curves and all sorts of little scallop things going on. That's why I'll be laser cutting mine, but doing it by hand, if you've got straight edges, just use a utility knife, easy peasy. But when you do that, make sure you have crop marks. So the crop mark is a marking that's outside of the bleed area that will show where the actual edge of your artwork really is. And then you just put your straight edge right down, line up those lines, and whoosh, make the cut. So that's our artwork. We also have a utility knife. Make sure if you're using a utility knife that you have a nice new blade in there, which this one is not. I need to change it. It's kind of dull. We also have a bone folder. A lot of people don't know what a bone folder is, but a bone folder is it's a book arts tool that's used most commonly for book arts. It's great for doing edges and things like that. But what we're going to be using it for is making sure that as we put our artwork down onto the chipboard and we glue it down, we'll be using this nice straight edge to push out any air pockets as we're doing that, to make sure that everything stays nice and flat. So you don't have to have a bone folder. They're very, very easy to use. They're really not expensive to pick up. You can buy them online. They're called bone folder because they're actually made out of bone. Fun fact. You can buy them that are plastic. I have a few that are plastic. I prefer the ones that are real bone. This one's a real bone. The bone ones tend to be a lot softer. They have rounder edges on them. It really doesn't matter. You could use a spatula. You could use, anything really. You could use this to help push it down. It really doesn't matter. A scrap of chipboard is going to work just fine. Just as long as it's nice and flat, you'll be able to use that to flatten out your artwork. And that's what matters the most. We have a ruler or a straight edge, something that can help you make straight cuts. Over here we have our glue. So we've got two types of glue that I'll talk about. Spray mount, which is what these are. I picked this stuff up at a hobby store and it's small and costs a lot. And I picked this up at a hardware store and it's giant and it costs a lot less. It's like half the price of this other stuff. It's both basically the same things. You can get spray mount that's repositionable. I usually don't do that because I kind of don't trust it. But the Super 77 is highly recommended. A lot of people who talk about making prototypes, they're using Super 77. It works great. It's like 10 bucks at Lowe's or something like that. Not too bad. The other type of glue that is worth mentioning is PVA. I picked this up off of Amazon, I think, but you can get it from a lot of different art stores. PVA is a water-based glue. It's essentially Elmer's glue. I actually have no idea what the difference is, but when you put it down, it looks like Elmer's glue. So maybe it just has more of the glue stuff in it or something, I don't know. But it's really, really great. Has a really strong permanent bond, but it's water-based. So if you're using a water-based glue to do your gluing, keep that in mind. You're gluing paper products that have fiber onto other paper products that are fiber, and fibers soak stuff up. So if you're using water-based, it just soaks it up and it's going to make all your board bend a little bit. And so if you're using PVA, make sure that you dry it properly. And so you'll need to, I usually stack it all on top of each other, and then I put big books and weights and anything that's just super heavy and flat on top of it, and then let it just sit overnight or a day or two and let the glue 100% dry out. And then when you take the stuff off, it's nice and straight and everything looks perfect and super strong bond. We'll be using the spray mount for all of the paper, gluing the paper down to the chipboard, but we are going to be using the PVA for the hinges. That's the hinge. So the hinge, if you think of it, that's the part that's getting bent the most. There's a lot of tension that's going to be going onto that. So what I use for hinges is book cloth. That's what these things are. I've already cut them down to size, about 1 inch wide, and it's just long enough to be able to cover over the hinge area that I'm going to need the hinges for, also for the map. See that? Perfect. So book cloth it's the stuff that goes on the outside of hardbound books. And on one side is fabric, and on the inside is paper. And this stuff is meant for bending. It's meant for, exactly what we're doing here. So it'll last for a really, really long time. I'll be using the PVA to glue that down because I don't want that to break away from the chipboard or rip out or anything like that during the life of this prototype. Now, If you don't want to get book cloth, which again, you can get at a art store, book art store, you can get it online. They sell it in big rolls. You can also get it as book tape, which is essentially the same thing. It just comes in a roll, like a masking tape type of roll. You could also use just any tape. You could use masking tape or packing tape or duct tape. All those things will work. Just keep in mind with packing tape or duct tape, the top of it is plastic, and then you're gluing paper on top of that. So over time, as you're bending, that paper will eventually start to separate because it doesn't have that great of a bond to plastic. And so just keep that in mind. With masking tape, over time, it will start to tear because it's essentially paper with glue on it. So it all depends on how long you expect the prototype to be in use. But masking tape would totally work if it's just gonna be a few times that thing gets bent and opened. So, but we'll be using book cloth for ours. And then we also have a little brush, and that's gonna help us get our PVA onto our boards. And a pencil for good measure. Now we're gonna need that to be able to mark some things down. So those are all the tools that you'll need to be able to make this happen. It's really not that much. Honestly, you probably have a lot of this stuff around your house. Just picking up some of the glues and maybe a bone folder or something is all you really need to do. Like I said, most of the expense is really in the artwork, taking the time to get the artwork put together so it's as good as possible, and then getting the chipboard. But with that said, now we're gonna go and start making this thing. So the first thing that we will do is take their chipboard and we will mount the front side artwork to the chipboard. Now the reason we do the front side artwork is that's where we're gonna make all the cuts, because the front here, we want that to bend down so the front is what's viewable when it's sitting inside the box. And the inside, the back side, is what's hidden. So we're gonna glue down all of the front sides first. I recommend leaving all the back sides inside so you don't accidentally glue them down to something and then have to go reprint everything, which would be a bummer. Okay, we are out here in the garage. We have our spraying side, we have our mounting side. We don't want to be mounting where we're spraying or else the glue gets all over the place. It's a big mess. So we have all of our chipboard, we have all of our artwork. Let's get down to business. Let's do this. One thing I recommend is have your bone folder out, ready to go. You don't want to be scrambling trying to find this while you're also holding a sticky sheet of paper. So have this out, ready to go. Okay. All right, we've got enough that we've got a nice little bubbly coat on that. They say to let it sit for like, I don't know, a little while before you put it on there. I don't know. I think that was enough. Okay, let's do this. So pick up this side. Now when we do this, when we put this on here, what we're gonna do is one hand is going to be holding this side up, and one side is going to be aligning it up. So we're gonna do one corner, we're gonna do our best to get that corner to lock right on the corner. And then we're going to slowly drop this down to try and make sure that this stays as straight along that outer edge as possible. This side's still staying up. Now we're going to take our bone folder and we're just going to smooth out the side that we just adhered down. Now, working our way from the bottom, we're going to slowly go up and then out, and then up, and then out, and then up, and then out. So we're always going up and then out until we get to the end. Look at that. That is beautiful. Perfect, smooth edge. We can run this thing around here. You can see no air pockets. It just looks smashing. And it goes right along the edge, right along the other smart edge. That is exactly what we need to have happen. One done. Next up. And this is what we call fast forward. Okay, we have our boards. Front sides are all mounted, the back sides are not. Now let's put some hinges in here. So right out of the gate, There were a few things that happened while I was gluing it down. The first one was when I glued this down, there was a little bit of an edge that got left out there. Even though this is nicely aligned, I messed up right there. So we're gonna fix that board first. So fortunately with this, it's really not that big of a deal. What are we doing here? So all we're gonna do is put this down. We're going right along the edge of the paper, and we just want to make sure that the edge runs right where the paper is. So when we do the next side, and I did change my blade so it's nice and sharp now. So the front side and the back side will actually line up, and it'll be a lot easier rather than like trying to guess what side is, how it should work on the back side. So, whoop, chop that little thing off. And now it looks like we didn't make a mistake. How nice. Perfect. Oh, let's start with this one. We've got this ready. Don't need that. Okay, so this is what we're gonna do. Now that we've trimmed off this little edge so it looks perfect, now let's put the hinges in. So what we'll be doing is making an incision from one edge of the board to the other edge. Now, if you look at the artwork, I have little crop marks that I put in there for myself to make this way easier. Had I not put those in there, I would be making a complete guess as to where I'm cutting. So crop marks, very important. So all we're gonna do is put our straight edge down, line it up for one crop mark, straight down to the next one. And now as I make this cut, I'm not gonna be cutting from one edge all the way through to the other side. I'm only going to be cutting from the edge of my artwork, which is really a bleed, to the other edge of my artwork. But I want to keep my chipboard intact. And the reason you want to do that is if you cut this thing into two and you've got two pieces, now you have to figure out how to get them back together again, make sure that they stay perfectly aligned as you glue the backside. Why put yourself through all of that when you can let the chipboard do all the work for you? Here we go. One side to the other side, and again, I'm only going to the inside edge. And when you're cutting, another tip here, take your time. There's no reason to rush through this. And also, you don't need to push down so hard that you're gonna cut through the whole thing in one cut. The best way to do this is 2 or 3 cuts to get through. The first cut really is just to break through the paper so you don't end up ripping your artwork. And then the next cut, I think we're gonna need another one to get through. That third cut, oh yeah, we got a lot of pressure. All right, let's see our handiwork here. Zoop. Look at that, perfect, cut through, but we've stopped on the margin. So even though it's cut, it holds together. Perfect. Now, we're gonna do all of our cuts, then we'll come back and put all of our hinges on. So, fast forward time. Got all the cuts made. I almost ripped all the way through this one. Yikes. So, we have our nice little incision there on the back. Now, the hinge. To make sure that we align this properly, we're gonna put it down just a little bit of the way. Grab our little pencil, put some marks up there, and then we'll put it up here, make sure that the cut is right in the middle, put some marks on either side. Now I've got a little bit of a guide to get this to happen. Round side, get our glue, get our brush. Easy as this. See what I mean? Looks like Elmer's glue. I don't know how much we're gonna need though. At first, usually it takes a while to get glue into your brush. So it'll take a little bit extra glue, I think, for this first one. Yeah. Gotta make sure it's nicely covered. Nice. See how it's already curling up? Because all the water content in the glue pulls it up like that. Okay, got that, like that. Pull that up. And then The good thing about PVA though is while it's drying, it's actually very workable. This, we just want that to go from one edge to the other edge. Take our straight edge. There it is. We have ourselves a hinge. Now, front side, back side, and then put artwork over the top. This is gonna look smashing. So let's do the rest. Something I should pause and say here, on these boards where I have a hinge that's only going through a very small section, it should probably go without saying, but we'll say it anyway. Obviously, we don't want to put the hinge on where it ends up going way down over the top of our other components and then ends up being glued to the back side of some of our tiles, right? So where we've made our cut, we know that it's right on the edge of our bleed area. We're safe there. For these, on these sides, we're going to put this down right to the edge of it, but no further, because we don't want any of this stuff on our tiles. Carry on. Okay, we have all of the hinges onto our boards. It's time for us to head back to the garage and get all the backside artwork glued on here. Two things keep in mind when you're out there gluing on the back sides. First, double check that you get the artwork aligned properly. So, one side's aligned with the side that it's supposed to be with. The last thing you want is the artwork turned upside down or something like that. So double check between every single board, put it on there, do a quick little okay, I got it. The other thing that you'll need to keep in mind is when we first did the front sides here, we aligned it to this bottom corner. So this edge over here and this bottom edge, that's what we aligned it to, so it's nice and square. See, we have a bit of excess over here. When we do the back side, we do not want to again start on that side. We have to start on the opposite side because that's where we trued up the artwork originally. So keep that in mind as well. As you put the artwork down, keep in mind it's going to be the opposite. It's going to feel like you're doing things backwards, but that's what you're going to need to do to make sure that your artwork is squared up at the same corner that you squared it up the first time, or else you'll be way, way off on the other side. So let's head out to the garage and let's get these backsides glued on, and then we'll be super close to being done. With all the backsides mounted, we are at the home stretch here. We are almost done. If you're going to be cutting these things out by hand, using a utility knife and a straight edge, all you have to do at this point is just cut the things out. It'll be as easy as lining up the crop marks that you have in there and making the cuts. Now, when you make those cuts, much like when we did the hinges, don't cut all the way through the board. Only cut from the edge where you need it and then stop right at the edge. And you want to maintain the frame around the outside edge. By doing that, you end up using the board to hold your artwork in place, and it will make all of your cuts a whole lot more accurate. And then that's it. You'll have a finished cut out prototype. All the boards are going to look fantastic. Now for me, I will be laser cutting all of this out. So rather than crop marks, I have on here registration marks. I have little points of registration. If you're here, I'll show this one. Zoom. I have these little marks in here in different places. And then I'll supply the people who will be laser cutting this out with a die line template. So it shows where all of the little areas that need to be cut are, and that's in one color. And then all these little registration lines, and I have little different things that line up to different parts on there. And that's in red. And so they know, don't cut that, do cut this. But those little red marks will help them line everything up. Now, when you're cutting this out with a laser cutter is using a laser to cut through this. And so it will burn the edges. So before handing this over, you have to tape it. So that's the next part. So there's a few more extra steps. That's what this tape is for. When taping down a prototype, you want to get the tape to be as not sticky as possible. So this is what I do. take some tape. Voila. And this big blue stuff or the green stuff is usually actually pretty mild in terms of how sticky it is. Measure out how much I need. And then I stick it onto myself. Yeah. So doing this makes the tape, if I can get the tape back off of me, the tape picks up a whole bunch of the lint and the other stuff that's usually stuck to your clothing, and it just reduces the tack more and more and more. So now it's not near as tacky as it was before. And as I do this, all these little marks that I have in here that are meant to register, I need to make sure that they stay clear. I'm just gonna cover them up first and then I'll cut them out. I'll rip them out afterwards. Actually, I think I can get it right. Oh yeah, that's perfect. I'll get it right above there. All right, so anywhere where the laser will be cutting around, you need to tape over. So for this, all of this inside stuff, it's not gonna be cutting, but all of the edges it will. So I'll put tape, surround the whole thing. Now, I did save, just so you could see, because this is gonna take me forever to tape this on. It takes forever to tape it and then it takes forever to take the tape off. For this prototype that I already showed you, where all of this has already been taken off, but I did leave a few pieces where I did not take the tape off. And if you look at them, let's see, oh, that's a good one right there. I'm not sure if you can see that, but in there, there's all these little burn marks and things like that where it's just like burned through it. That's why you put the tape on. To take it off, it's actually really simple. You just need to grab one of those corners, pull it down a bit, and then you're gonna pull it off. Now, when you do this, sometimes, especially with that spray mount, you might peel up your artwork. That's okay, just have a glue stick on hand, put a little dab there and put it back down. The other thing that can happen as you're peeling this up, and it's actually happening with this one, is the tape starts to rip the paper. And if that's the case, stop and start on another corner and just try from the opposite direction. So what ends up happening, especially if you're not using really high quality paper, is paper's made up of fibers and fillers. And where the fibers are, the ink will soak into it and it has a really great, it holds tight. Where the fillers are, that's like all the glue and the other stuff that's in paper. Where that stuff is, sometimes if that's close to the surface, it makes the paper really weak and the tape will grab hold of it and just rip your ink right off. So you gotta be really careful. I usually try to pull at a nice horizontal angle. And then when we get down to that part where it started ripping, we're just gonna be extra careful and try to go the opposite direction of where it was ripping. Look at that, boom. So there's a little fold there where the paper comes up, and we'll just take a little dab of, with this actually, I don't even think I'll need to do anything. It actually covers itself up and you can't really see it. But I might put just a small little dab from a glue stick there and just push that down just to make sure that it doesn't flop up when someone's using it. And one more thing I wanted to show you before we end this video is how to make our hinges look really nice. So the show before, I have a hinge here. You can see through here where that hinge happens. And I want to show you how to make that work. So this is board I haven't actually run the hinge yet, so it doesn't fold, but it wants to, right? Because it's cut. So the two boards are separated on this side, and then our book cloth is on this side, and then the paper's over the top of that. So what we're gonna do to make this work is we're gonna fold this up a bit, take our bone folder, and this is what bone folders are good at, is making a score. So we can see right where our little corner edge is going to be, and we're gonna score right along that edge. Now, normally when you're scoring paper, when you score it down, you want to fold away from the score. But in this case, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna do the opposite because we need ours to fold a certain direction. But when we score it down like this, it trains the paper where we want it to fold. And if you don't do this, the paper will often it finds its own channels, and you'll get things starting to crack, and you'll get breaks in the ink. You have these little white specks. I mean, you're gonna have that regardless. Even professionally, you're gonna have little specks when you do that, but check that out. And because of the way we did the hinges, where we had the artwork line up and then we cut through the artwork, we have really nice confidence that when we're done with this thing's gonna fold down and it's gonna line up. Looks super nice. See that? There we go. We now have a folding board. And there you have it, a professional looking, high quality, beautiful prototype that you can demo with, make videos with, photograph, send to reviewers. There's so much you can do, and you really can do this at home just by taking the time to do it. So get out there, make something beautiful.